Happy Father's Day. Can we have all the dads stand up? They'll enjoy this, I know. All the dads in the house stand up this morning. A little round of applause for all the fathers in the room. Thank you, dads, for all you do. You can have a seat. That's your gift for today. You're welcome. You're welcome. Go ahead and open up, if you would, with me to Luke chapter 12. Put your finger on verse 13. We're going to be verse 13 through 21, continuing our study in the parables. Before we do, I need to make a confession, a personal confession this morning. It's appropriate for Father's Day. I care way too much about my lawn. I care way too much about my yard. Are there any other people in the room? And this could be men or women, I get that. Anyone else in the room carry that same affliction? Go ahead and hold your hands up high. It's okay, you're in good company. You care too much about your yard. I do. I'm that guy. I know I drive my neighbors crazy. I know they think I'm insane. I walk my yard. You know, I've got a certain walk. I've got a walk that's just like a posture that's just for my yard. I put both hands behind my back and I just kind of walk slowly and I'll stop and I'll just kind of look at things. I'll inspect things and I'll kind of walk over here, you know, and I'll look at this part of the yard. And I do that diligently. I've got enough yard equipment to have my own commercial landscape company. I do. I mean, you name it, I have it. I've got two leaf blowers. I don't know why I have two. I have two of them. I know what you're asking. Yes, there have been times I've used them both at the same time, one in each hand, just blowing stuff. I'll go out, if I've had a bad day, I'll get my leaf blower and just go outside. Just therapeutic. I've spent enough time on that leaf blower to learn a foreign language. I could be fluent in French right now. I know that. I love to be out in my yard. I love to be diligent in making sure that it is in the right shape. I notice every little weed, every little inconsistency. I know it well enough to know where the trouble is, where I need to apply maybe more time or more love or more nutrients, what have you. I know my yard well. Here's the real confession. Here's the true confession this morning. I don't always apply the same diligence to my heart. I know my yard sometimes better than I know my heart. Isn't that scary? I can do a better job in my life of walking around in my heart. In our text today, Jesus is going to give a response to a man who didn't truly know the state of his heart. And Jesus is going to push back on this, push back on him, and help him understand that his heart was not in the condition that it should have been in. As a matter of fact, he had some weeds, if you will, growing in his heart, and one weed in particular, the weed of greed. The weed of greed. And in our lives, I think if we're to be honest, a lot of us would agree and or confess that it's easy to have the weed of greed pop up in different places and parts of our lives. And so I want you to look at the text with me. I want to read it together. Can we stand up and read God's word this morning together? Luke chapter 12, verse 13. Listen to what it says. Now someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Hey, you there, who appointed me? Who appointed me, Jesus, a judge or arbitrator over the two of you?" Then he said to him, or said to them, that means the disciples in this gathered crowd, he said to them, "Beware and be on your guard against every form of greed. For not even when one is affluent does his life consist of his possessions." And he told them this parable. He said, "The land of a rich man was very productive. And he began thinking to himself, saying, 'What shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops?' And then he said, 'This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build larger ones. I'll build bigger barns. I'll store all of my grain and all of my goods there. And then I'm going to say to myself, You have many goods stored up for many years to come. Relax, eat, drink, and enjoy yourself. But then God said to this man, you fool, this very night your soul is demanded of you. And as for all that you have prepared, who will own it now? Who will own it now? Such is the one who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich in relation to God. Father, as we study your word, help it to encourage us, help it to challenge us. God, help me to get out of the way. It's not about me, it's what you have to say to your gathered people today. So speak truth to our lives, even when it hurts. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. You may be seated. So here's a few important pieces of context in this parable. It opens up with an interruption. You could hear that. You could see it. You read that. Jesus is talking, as a matter of fact, in Luke chapter 12, before this interruption, Jesus had been talking about how God provides, about God's provision for his people. And this man interrupts Jesus like, hey, I don't care about that. Tell me, or tell my brother to give me some more of the inheritance. And so in this day and age, the law of primogeniture stated that the older sibling, so there's two brothers here, the older sibling was to get a double portion of the inheritance. And so this younger brother is upset. He wants what? He wants more money. He says, hey, Jesus, you step in and fix this. You tell my brother to give me some more of that money that he was left. It's strange when you read the parables. Almost half of all the parables are about material possessions. You notice that? Almost half. Almost half of all the parables, Jesus is teaching and talking about materialism. As a matter of fact, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, those three gospels, 1 out of every 6 verses talks about materialism. So Jesus had a lot to say about how we handle material goods. Why is that? Why is that? We know this. Because nothing else in our lives has the ability to drive our desires and our focus, our time and our attention like materialism does. And it's so easy for us to get caught up in that. It's so easy for this weed called greed to begin to grow in our lives. And so what does Jesus say to this gathered crowd in verse 15? Look at verse 15. What does he say? He tells them what? He says, be aware and be on guard. So here's the big idea today. Put it into one sentence. How do you guard against greed? How do you guard against this weed called greed? You gotta walk your heart. That's it. You gotta walk your heart. You gotta be diligent in inspecting your heart. You gotta know the state of what's happening on the inside. But how do you spot it? You gotta know what greed is. Here's a good biblical definition of greed. It's this: the inordinate, insatiable desire to accumulate money, power, and security to such a degree that it supersedes our spiritual integrity. That's just saying that we put it in a place, in a priority that it doesn't belong. It's inordinate. It's upside down, if you will. We put earthly things over eternal things. That is what greed looks like. Let me say this: greed is not having nice things. There's nothing wrong with success, and there's nothing wrong with hard work that pays off. That's a beautiful thing. There's nothing wrong with having different material possessions in your life. Some of us have those things. That's great. God has blessed you. Amen. The trick is to not let those things take priority in our life. And so the conversation today should not guilt you. The goal is not for you to be guilted when you leave today. The goal is for you to be on guard. Does that make sense? The goal is for you to be on guard. Last week, I was at high school beach retreat all week. And I heard we got some rain last week. Is that accurate? There's lots of rain back home in Houston, at least my part of Houston, we got a lot of rain. So I got back on Thursday, and I got home. You know what I did? Yeah, mowed my yard. That's exactly right. Luggage went inside. I threw on my sweats, my cut-off sweatpants that are my official yard mowing shorts. I got one pair, those are them. And I went outside, and I began to do yard work. We got a lot of rain. You know what I found all over my yard, different points and places? Weeds. Yeah, they weren't there when I left. I just mowed my yard on Saturday night before I headed out to Pensacola, Florida. Just in a matter of days. There are weeds in places that they weren't just a few days before. In this text, did you notice something? What happens? When is the brother asking this question to Jesus? Just after he had gained something. Here's the point I'm making. Greed grows and wants to grow in our life after the gain. Greed grows after the gain. Just like a weed grows after the rain, greed grows after the gain. It is. We know that. We have situations in our life we can look back on. I can remember being a kid on Christmas Day, getting a brand new skateboard that I wanted so badly. A little Vision skateboard. This is back in the 80s. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I'm on video, but my parents used to give me such a hard time. They videotaped Christmas Day, and I'm complaining that I got only one gift, you know? Here I am, I got this skateboard that I wanted, but it wasn't enough. Listen, all of us could tell stories, some more serious than that, of moments in time when we've been given something, when we've gained something in our life and it's not enough. Greed wants to grow after the gain. And in this parable, that's exactly what happens. Here's this brother who just received a large inheritance. He would have been rich by all the standards of that day. This man would have been a rich man, and it happened just like that. You would think he would have been ecstatic, but no, what is he? He's upset. He's greedy. He's just been given a tremendous amount of wealth. But what's starting to grow in his life? Greed. And so Jesus says, be on guard. And then he says, against every form of greed. And that's important because we think greed, most oftentimes, we associate it with what? Money, materialism. And that's part of it for sure. But you know this, you could be greedy in your relationships. You could be greedy in your relationships. Think about that. God gives us relationships. You know, God gives us a family oftentimes, or a mate that we pursue. And sometimes those relationships, I remember early on, my wife and I, as I courted her, we began to pursue our relationship. There are different levels that we arrived at. What happens when God gives you a gain in that relationship? Do you still practice the same integrity you did early on? Or do you allow yourself and your passions and your desires to drive you into places and become greedy and put you in positions that you don't belong? You could be greedy in your relationships. You can mishandle the people that God has placed in your life. That you could be greedy there. Your relationships can be all about you. You can mishandle relationships. You can mishandle your time. What happens when the margins in your life change and you've gained more time in your schedule? What do you do with that time? Do you serve? Do you allow God to use that time for eternal purposes? Or do you find yourself caught up in pursuing earthly things? You can be greedy in your time. And most especially, once again, you could be greedy in your finances. What do you do when God gives you a gain financially? What do you do with that? Do you allow the Lord to use that? How do you allow him to invest that for you? And what about your influence? What about when God gives you a new platform or promotion? Do you allow him to use that platform, use that influence? Or do you become greedy with it and use it for maybe purposes that are selfish and to pursue fleshly desires? And so Jesus says, hey, be on guard against every form of greed, because here's the truth. When God gives us a gain, when we gain something in life, we have the choice. We can be content, we can be thankful, or we can be greedy. And I've found in my life that greed wants to replace contentment. Paul wrote about being content so much, over and over again. He said, I've learned to be content in any and all circumstances, in any and all situations. I've been hungry, I've been well-fed, I've been naked, I've been clothed. He talks about all these different circumstances and situations he's been in. He said, I have learned how to be content in all things. We have to guard against this weed called greed, and most especially after the game. After the game. But what do? How do you handle it? If you see this weed of greed start to pop up in your life, what do? You treat it, you treat greed with gratitude and generosity. With gratitude and generosity. You want to push back on greed in your life, whether it's in your relationships, your influence, your material things that you have been blessed with, your time. What do? You treat it with gratitude and generosity. Over and over again in Scripture, you hear this phrase, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. 44 times. 44 different times in Scripture, you read that phrase. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. That's gratitude. Gratitude is simply giving thanks and trusting in the goodness of God, no matter what we think we lack. But Christian gratitude is different. Did you know this? Christian gratitude is much different than the gratitude of the world. Because Christian gratitude carries with it a confession of lordship. Do you know that? That's what that says. Give thanks to who? To the Lord. Christian gratitude carries with it a confession of lordship. That means that we know and understand everything we have in life, all the good things come from him. And he is over it all. And we trust that. So Christian gratitude carries a confession of lordship. And then generosity. As Christ's followers, we're called to share what we have. Not out of compulsion, but out of love. We're called to be people who are generous. There's an old story of a rich rancher, and he invited a pastor over to eat to share a meal. And so this rancher and the pastor, they have this meal, and afterwards the rancher leads him outside, and he wants to show him the expanse of his ranch. And so he points to the north, and he says, you see all these oil wells scattered across this field? All of those are mine. That's where all my wealth comes from. I'm a billionaire because of all these oil wells. And then he points to the south, and he points to all these hundreds and hundreds of acres of cattle and barns and farming equipment. He says, hey, that's all mine too. All of that is mine. And then he points out to the east, all these parcels of land that he had given all of his children. Now they have houses on it, and their homes, and they live there. And he says, all of that is mine as well. And he points out to the west, and he sees this massive 100-acre pond. And he says, that's all mine too. And it's got boats and all these great fishing spots all over it. And he says, that's all mine. And the pastor puts his hand on the man's shoulders. And he says, that's great. But he takes the other hand and he points to heaven. And he says, how much do you have that direction? How much do you have that direction? Hey, all of this is great. But what have you stored up that direction? Here's the last thing about greed. Greed will choke out the growth of godly things in your life. When we read the Bible, sometimes we fail to put flesh on what we've read. The tragic part of this parable is what? A father has died, and two brothers are what? Fighting. over money. In Jewish culture, living in harmony with your family was important. It was a command. It was something that was very serious in that world, in that day, in that time. And here you have two brothers at odds because one has placed riches over relationships. Greed will choke out the growth of godly things in your life. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 19, it says this: such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessors. It takes away life. It takes away growth of godly things. This parable has a tragic ending. Verse 20, God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is demanded of you. And as for all that you have prepared, who's going to own it now? In other words, you can't take it with you. What do you have that direction? Father's Day is always hard for me, or at least it has been for the last 20 plus years. My dad was my hero, even though it was very interesting growing up in my home. My father was abused physically as a child. He grew up with a very temperamental father. He was an alcoholic, and he used to beat my dad with a bullwhip. My dad left for Vietnam when he was a young man and did 2 tours in Vietnam. And I've shared about my father before. I thought it was fitting today to close this way. He served 2 tours in Vietnam and then came back to Oklahoma, where we're all from, and got in trouble and did 4 years in the state penitentiary in Oklahoma, and met my mom on the prisoner release program. My father was 6'4", 280, mean. And I grew up in a very toxic home, verbally, physically abusive. But my dad was still my hero. He still was my best friend. I gave my life to Christ when I was 19 years old. I had my own struggles with alcohol and drugs. And immediately I had a burden for my dad. And at this time, he was in his late 40s. And he got sick. He got sick with Agent Orange cancer from his time in Vietnam. And our whole family was rallying around Dad. There's 5 of us kids in my house. And I've got a picture on the screen of my dad. This is not too long before he passed away, but I think you can see he's reading the Bible. My dad gave his life to Christ about 1.5 years before he passed away, and I'm thankful for that because I'll get to see him again someday, and I believe that. I believe that someday I'll get to give my dad a hug. We were in my little Volkswagen Jetta one day at a 4-way stop sign in my little hometown, out in the middle of nowhere, out in the country. And I'm driving my dad. I think I was taking him to treatment one day or something. And my dad was not a very emotional person. He was not one to talk about his feelings. And we're at this stop sign. I never will forget it. We stop, and he puts his hand on my leg, and he says, "Son," he said, "I'm not ready to die. I'm not ready to die." He said, there's so much. There's so much I want to do, I want to fix. And he said this: "I just wish I had more time. I just wish I had more time." Greed takes the one thing that we can't get back? Time. Time. We never had a lot. My father hung garage doors most of my life. I'd get up early every morning and work all day. But he spent a lot of time on things that didn't matter. This parable is a warning against that. It's a warning against how you invest things. How do you invest your time, your talent, your possessions, your relationships? Because eventually, what happens? Eventually, God calls us home. And everything we have, everything we've accumulated is either going to stay here on earth or it's going to go to eternity with us. And what will last for all of eternity is the investments that we make through God. We give our life to Christ. That's what he does. That's what the gospel is. The gospel is us being reconciled to God. So why? So he can take our life and he can do something beautiful in it and through it. That's the gospel. God wants to know us and wants us to know him. So what? So we can make a difference on this side of eternity in those he's placed around us. And that will last all of eternity. Time. Would you bow your heads? Would you close your eyes with me just for a moment? This morning, I believe there's people in this room. Man, you so relate to these verses today. You so relate to this thought we've been talking about. You maybe even relate to some of my story. I want to challenge you. I want to encourage you. Today, if God is moving in your heart, perhaps to come into a relationship with him, to make some things right. You say, man, that story of your father, I can relate to that. I've been running from God for a long time. Or I've been away from God. Hey, I want to challenge you. Don't continue to wait. Don't continue to delay. I believe there's some dads in here this morning. You need to make things right. You need to allow God to have control of your life so that he can make a difference in you and through you. There's other people in this room this morning. You sense that God is moving in your heart. Don't walk out these doors today and continue to wait. Don't delay. If God is calling you to him, here in a moment, we're going to have a time of invitation. It's your invitation. It's an invitation to you to stand up, walk down this aisle and say, today, I want to get right. I want to give my life to Christ. I want to give God control of my life. Maybe you're here today and you are a Christ follower, but you've been away from God, and today you sense the need to come back to him. You say, I'm a Christian, but man, I've been living away from God and outside the church, but today I want to make a new commitment. I want to renew my commitment to God. Or maybe you're here in this room and you say, hey, I want to get plugged in. I want to be a spiritual leader in my home. I want to make spiritual investments. I want to make sure my family's in church. But we don't have a church we belong to. This is a great church. We want to invite you to join this church today. Here's what I'd say, simply say to all of us in this place today. No matter how God is moving, this invitation is for you. Take that step, stand up, come down front. Let us begin to help you unpack and understand what God's calling you to. However he's moving in your life. I'm going to say a prayer. When I say amen, the band's going to play a song during that time. Don't wait, don't delay. Be bold, be courageous. Father, give those in this room that you're calling to yourself, no matter whatever it is you're doing in their heart and their life. Give them the courage, the strength, the boldness they need to stand up and to take that step. Help them not to delay. Help them not to wait. We ask these things in Christ's name.